Welcome to the first edition of something that we're calling Unscripted. It's a series of interviews with people that I've got to know in my career that I deeply admire and whose opinion I respect. I thought it might be just a bit of fun to do these, just to break up perhaps some of the monotony that we may be feeling in the midst of the current situation that we are in. Many of us working from home for the first time. So it's really just a little bit of fun, some entertainment. But I hope it does deliver a different perspective from people from great walks of life, varied walks of life, that have reached the top of their profession and have opinions, views, and experiences that might be relevant, just simply interesting, and perhaps entertaining. We talk to a group of people from the world of economics, politics, the arts, sport, all of whom have something to bring, particularly at this moment. The first one is with Dr. Chris Thornberg. I met Chris about a year ago and was deeply impressed by his knowledge. He founded a company here in Los Angeles called Beacon Economics. Dr. Chris advises companies from Chevron to major aspects of government here in California. He's testified before the House Congress Committee, but most importantly, he was one of the very, very few to predict, on record, the subprime mortgage crisis that beset the US, and also he predicted the downturn in the economy that occurred in the late 2000s. What's particularly interesting, I think, about this interview is, in part, it offers hope. He talks very differently from the mainstream media about the effect of the pandemic economically for the rest of the year. And that particularly caught my attention. He's a great guy. He's larger than life, and he's not afraid to give you his opinion. Sit back and enjoy. I hope you get as much pleasure out of watching as I did interviewing. Here he is, Dr. Chris Thornberg. In your life as an economist, whatever that means, right?
What that means.
Everybody loves a great story.
Yeah.
Right? Any good stories, like, when you and I have sat in front of a few people around a table occasionally, right? That's how we met. But any good moments where you've either gone, God, I was terrible, or wow, I was brilliant, or I didn't see that coming.
Many years ago, I worked briefly for not for a while, for a hedge fund in New York. And during the downturn, I was doing some consulting with them. It was pretty fun. I got to be in the belly of the beast a little bit. And I went in one time, and we had gotten a new board member on the panel. And the secretary there was trying to explain. She's like, we have a new guy coming in today. And I said, a new person? Oh, that's nice. Another economist? She says, yeah, I think he's an economist. What's his name? She says, Alan. Alan something. and I come in, of course, and it's no other than Alan Greenspan sitting at the table. These highly visible people like that, a lot of times you meet them and they're arrogant jerks. And I had no idea what to think about this guy. And I still remember the first time I had to give a speech in front of him. Literally, I walk in completely unprepared. Alan Greenspan is sitting there, and I have to give a forecast to Alan Greenspan. Who am I? I'm some punk kid with a Beacon Economics. I just started a year before in LA. And I was scared out of my mind. And I remember him sitting there with his hands across his lap and listening very carefully, very calmly, nothing at all, And at the end, he asked me a few questions. We went back and forth. He had a couple things he had to say, but then he turned around very nicely at the end. He said, that was a very good forecast. I really enjoyed that. And at that point in time, we became colleagues, and I got to know him. And every once in a while, other people would come in. And I still remember what I learned is watching him. Someone came in one time, and it was a completely different scenario where these people came in, and they were from some group, and it was just that we were going to have a recession, double dip, and this is why their model said this, but they couldn't explain their model, and here's their number, and they're certain it was true. And I was watching Greenspan yet again. It was very similar. He started out almost like he did his first time with me, with his hands crossed, his head down. But unlike with my case, by the end of that conversation, you could tell he was completely turned off, just calmly sitting there. He had turned these people off completely. And they left, and we were talking about it. And I was upset. These guys were full of shit, and I knew it. And I was, and Alan just kind of laughed and nodded, didn't say anything. And then later on, I got up and I said, you didn't. It's like, I think you agreed with me. He says, oh yeah. I said, but you didn't say anything to those guys. You didn't ever pop up. And he says, Chris, I've learned over time that sometimes it's better to just not say anything. And, that man had such grace. He understood things. He didn't feel the need to debate. I learned so much from knowing Alan Greenspan for those few years, how you can be, how you should be as a leader. I don't always live up to it, but I learned a lot, and I try.
You had the North Star.
Yeah, a little bit, just for a brief period of my life. Yeah.
That's lovely. You may well be giving hope at this moment, right?
I will tell you that I don't think it's hope. I think it's logic. Everybody's talking about this being a protracted long downturn. We don't think so. Why? Well, let's talk about what we don't know, which is a lot. Let's talk about thinking about what we do know, which is when you break it down, not that hard to figure out. And what it says is this is not protracted. Rather, this is, probably a record downturn in Q2, followed by one of the biggest upturns ever in Q3. Yeah, a little bit of damage along the way, but for the most part, this is a giant bounce. Hysteria is the new normal in these headlines. Remember, in January of last year, the markets were down 20% because of the recession that was about to happen, because of inflation, the collapsing real estate markets, and the Chinese trade war that was going to demolish American manufacturing. Remember, none of that happened. So this time you have a real shock. Yes, the expansion is truly over. But with that in mind, this is not a great recession type scenario. It's nothing close to it. Doesn't look anything like it. And to pretend it is, it's ridiculous.
Educate us, right? Like I'm not an economist, thank goodness that you are and I'm not. So give us some detail on this. Why?
What don't we know? And the answer is pretty much everything, right? While we hear nothing but dismal headlines and we have lots of dismal anecdotes, we don't know nothing. We have some Q1 numbers, of which really only a couple weeks of that month were actually impacted by these public health mandates. So we know there's a bunch of things happening. We're all obsessed with the virus. We're all stuck at home. We're all a little creeped out when we get in the highway and there's nobody on there. And everybody starts to panic. Particularly when you have all these forecasters that go out there and start saying, oh yeah, this is going to be ugly. It's going to be ugly. I mean, you look at Merrill Lynch, you look at UBS, you look at Wells Fargo. These guys are all predicting, unemployment rates staying elevated for a year and a half, 2 years. They're saying this is Great Recession plus. You have Moody's coming out and talking about 15 million foreclosures. We're just in the Great Recession. Whoa, time out, people. All based on what? You don't know anything. And to be clear, you can't just look at, say, the Great Recession and say, well, it's going to be like that. Why? Wait, here's the one data point we have. Initial claims for unemployment. Everybody knows that, right? Those numbers are through the roof. We're well over 30 million of these things 6 weeks into this. Put that in context, for the entire year 2008, there were 23 million claims for unemployment. So this is just, you've never seen anything like it. But that doesn't tell you anything. Employment numbers are lagging. The peak in initial claims for unemployment during the Great Recession was in June of 2009, the last month of the recession, and July, the first month of the recovery. That's when they peaked. And that's because businesses don't fire people because it's expensive. They don't want to hire people because it's expensive. And so it lags everything else. Well, this time around, the employment numbers you're seeing are not an indicator of something that happened 6-7 months ago that's having this terrible impact on the economy.
Yeah.
These are the direct manifestation of the public health mandates we put into place to control the virus. That's it. Now, the key is very simple. Let's say we put all these mandates into place, all these people went, quote unquote, into unemployment, and then a genius came up with a cure for the virus. Oh, never mind. Mandates go away, everybody goes back to work, right? We all know what would have happened. So then the question you have to ask yourself is, okay, so we really don't know anything, do we? Because the numbers we see today are not being driven by negative economic shocks. They're being driven by public health mandates. And I'm not saying this is costless. Of course, this is costly for the economy. But the damage done to the economy is being done right now in the midst of the fact that these people can't go to work and these companies can't open. How much damage that generates will determine how fast the bounce back is. And everybody's assuming tons and tons of damage, tons and tons of damage. Why would you assume that? Well, they're just jumping to conclusions. They're just making this sound as bad as possible because that is the new normal in terms of these headlines. As I already said, 15 months ago, markets are down 20%. 75% of the economists who contributed to the Wall Street Journal Next Recession Survey, they're all like, hey, it's got to be a recession in the next year. Why? Chinese trade war, inflation, collapsing real estate. None of that happened. So now you have a really very real shock hitting the economy. One, again, as noted, is going to end this expansion. It's done. The record expansion is now over. But nevertheless, that doesn't mean it's going to be protracted. How much damage gets done?
I want to challenge you a bit, right? I mean, I like what I'm hearing, right?
Okay.
So you're describing this as a V. And Q3?
V, very sharp V.
Okay.
Record down in Q2, record up in Q3.
But what happens to create the upward angle of the V in Q3?
Okay. The very simple thing is the economy reopens. Public health mandates go away. And then people go out and spend money. Businesses reopen. They rehire their people. We go about our daily lives. Nothing. I mean, why wouldn't we? Is the big question for everybody. Why wouldn't we just go back to our normal life? Now, the key there, of course, what everybody says is, well, the damage being done to the economy during these closures is profound. Households aren't making money and businesses aren't earning profit. And what does that mean? Well, that means, there's somebody's out there running around saying that 100,000 restaurants are going to go bankrupt because of this. Why? Well, because they can't make any money for a couple months. So, I mean, that happens to companies. It happens all the time. It happened to my company. I'm sure it's happened to your company. Anybody who owns a company knows that once in a while you don't make money. I like to point out to reporters, they used to call Black Friday because a retail company made no money until the Friday after Thanksgiving. That's when they finally made money for the entire year, was the day after Thanksgiving. That's why they call it Black Friday. Losing money happens sometimes. If you were profitable before, you'll be profitable after. Now, you're not going to just go belly up, and the idea that you are is crazy. Now, some companies might. Maybe some companies were near the edge or get pushed over the edge by this. Households, you might argue, who aren't making any money, well, they're going to have a tough time because when they come out of this, what are they going to do, right? They're not going to be able to spend money on anything. Well, again, you're leaping to conclusions there on the basis of what? And wait, let's back up for a second. Again, I'm just talking. Let's go through this again. Because remember, it's the damage done, whether it's because businesses can't reopen or people can't spend money, that will create this long-run harm, okay? Now, the way to think about this is not that, I'm not saying, listen, you got to be humble. All these guys who are running around saying end of the world, they're not starting from a point of humility on this because you have to, because we don't have anything like this on the record, right? And nothing in recent time, nothing in a modern economy. We have nothing to gauge our opinions on. So everything I'm saying here is a basis of me thinking about this from a very oblique standpoint. Understand there's lots of uncertainties, lots of variation here. If you just say it's going to be terrible, no, you don't know that. And you're wrong for saying it with such confidence because you don't have that confidence. What will determine how much harm happens in these couple months while we're shut down? And in turn, how much damage that will do to the ability for the economy to simply bounce back. Because again, once these mandates go away, in theory, we just go back to normal, right? That's a basic. 5 things that can happen. We said 5 questions you have to think about. Number 1, how long does this go? Number 2, how deep are the closures actually influencing the economy? Number 3, how healthy was the economy in the first place? Number 4, what is the government doing in the meantime? And then number 5, do we think consumers will change their behavior? Will preferences change dramatically as a result of the virus? Those are the 5 big questions you have to ask yourself. And depending on your answers to those, that will determine how much damage you think is going to occur and how slow the recovery will be. Okay, so go through them. How long? Well, we know that. I mean, actually we do. China. You can see all the Chinese numbers, they're in front of us. As long as we keep doing what we're doing and we're doing it well, this is basically a 3-month run to get these number of cases down to a bare minimum, and you start reopening things. In China, 3 months for industrial production to get basically back to pre-virus. About 4 months looks like for consumers to get back to normal. So this is a 3 to 4 month episode, ripples through the system, which by the way is basically March and Q2. Everything suggests by Q3, we're out of the woods. Economy's largely reopened. Not perfectly, but largely. Now, again, I'm not saying the virus is going to go away, but you have to point out to people that we're highly unlikely to have a second surge in this virus for a couple of reasons. We're a second huge surge. First reason is we're just aware of it. I mean, there is a learning curve here. You only get one Pearl Harbor, people.
Yeah.
I mean, people were dying of this thing, and while our president was saying everything was fine.
Yep.
That happens once, it doesn't happen twice.
Yep. Okay?
We get it now. Wash your damn hands, wear a mask, be careful. Got it. It's a different kind of world, right? Number 2 is obviously we have a lot more testing, a lot more experience, a lot more awareness. That's all part of that learning curve effect. But also we probably have a lot more people affected already. I mean, we know people have antibodies. There's going to be less susceptibility. Again, this all goes to saying, well, there may be hotspots here or there. It's just not going to be the same. So again, by Q3, we're largely out of the woods. And I think all the numbers suggest that. All right. Number 2, how deep is this? Well, again, it's visible, but not that deep. I mean, look, I get it. Hotels are shut down. Airlines are shut down. Lots of big hunks of retail are shut down. Recreation, tourism shut down. You add all those things up, it's smaller than healthcare. All those things together, all those industries together are a really not that big a portion of the U.S. economy. I mean, there's giant things like, housing and construction and manufacturing. These are massive parts of our economy. And for the most part, they really haven't been influenced all that much. Not yet, not in any substantial way. Now, eventually stuff starts to ripple through. We understand that people not buying cars now eventually will hit more and more of the auto sector, which will hit parts and stuff like that. But that cascade effect takes weeks, months to kick through the system. It doesn't happen overnight. There's a little bit of a shock absorber in the system.
Yeah.
So right now, it's maybe 10% of the economy shut down, maybe 12%. Not as much as you might think. That means most of the economy is still operating. Now, again, that expands over time because of supply chain effects, but it doesn't happen overnight. And indeed, we just got the March numbers for savings rates, and savings rates went from 7.6% to 13.1% from February to March. So there is tons of money getting tucked away, and that's going to come roaring out of the gates when we reopen, okay? Number 3, how healthy was the economy in the first place? Crazy healthy. Biggest problem in the U.S. over the last 2 years? Labor shortages. We've had more job openings than people looking for work. Debt to income ratios are down. Debt payment to income ratios are down. No, not just for the top 10%, for all Americans in all income categories. The housing market, 10 years of the highest median credit score for mortgage borrowers, record levels of equity, a shortage of housing units. I mean, look, there's no such thing as a bulletproof economy, but this thing's absolutely steel-plated. This is a tough economy. It really is. We were in a great place. What's the government doing? What's the government not doing? $2.5 trillion stimulus package? Holy schmoly. We got, you talk about politics. If this thing had happened around the election, right after the election, nothing would happen. Hey, you think of the Great Recession, how bad that was? And yet Mitch McConnell's primary goal in the beginning of 2009 was to make sure Barack Obama was a one-term president, not fixing the problems, okay? $2.5 trillion in stimulus. Again, context. In an average quarter, in 3 months, this nation has $5.5 trillion in economic transactions. $2.5 trillion of stimulus being poured into a $5.5 trillion quarter. You don't think that's going to do something? I get a lot of that goes right into the finance sector. I get it. But nevertheless, huge amount of stimulus. Last but not least, will people change their behaviors? Oh, all the futurists are out there. People are never going to go back to the ballpark. We're all going to be scared. People will never want to go to restaurants again. Oh, it's a new normal. Oh, really, people? Really? Pandemics haven't been with us? Let me see. Polio, diphtheria, typhus, yellow fever, scarlet fever, the plague, tuberculosis. Human beings have been dealing with pandemics for hundreds of years. And there has never been a circumstance by which they all went and decided to live in caves by themselves afterwards. They all went out and socialized and hung out with each other. You lay low when you have to, and then you go out and have fun when you can. That's not complicated. People aren't that fragile. Stop. We are not that fragile. And if we are, then we deserve a big kick in the butt. Because honestly, really? So no, this is not a Great Recession type scenario. In the Great Recession, millions of people lost their jobs because of the collapsing subprime bubble. Millions of jobs in real estate, construction, finance, retail, gone and gone permanently. Millions of people had no idea what they were going to do next. Today, we're dealing with millions of people who know exactly what they're going to do next. They're going to go and do in 5 weeks exactly what they were doing 5 weeks ago. This isn't complicated. There's no reason for it to stay in the system. You hit hard down, Q2, record down, 10, 12, 14% decline in GDP. Next quarter up by as much, back to normal by the end of the year.
You think we actually emerge from this better, stronger? And I don't mean, shit, there's jellyfish in the Venice Canal, right, for the first time. The water's never been clearer, right? You know, LA, I don't know, I think I can see the sun better than I used to. Sure. Do we economically come out of this stronger because companies have made better decisions as a consequence of this? Is there a positive?
Oh, I think there's a few positives. You know, one of the positives here, obviously, is that I think we're all learning a little bit. Maybe we don't have to go to the office every day. Maybe there are ways of doing things remotely. Yeah. I think this is a good lesson in how to stay a little closer to home. We don't all need to be on the road at the same time. Given our stressed environment, our stressed roadways, that's not a bad thing to learn, right? I think that's a positive lesson to take out of this. A second positive lesson is a little more direct. You know, while we're sitting around feeling sorry for ourselves, let's also acknowledge another little fact, which is we are lucky as hell.
Yeah.
I mean, come on, this thing could have been a lot worse.
Yep.
If this thing look, once they get the numbers in appropriately, the death rate, the mortality rate on this is going to drop well below 1%. We all know that. It's not that bad. If this thing was a SARS or a MERS, oh my God. I mean, this would have been a true socio-demographic disaster. Now we're going to be a lot smarter about things. Yeah. And I think that's going to come out of this. That's going to be pretty good. But, you know, I tell you, while those two things are small silver linings, there are a few bad things, I think, that we should be learning from this too. First thing is, this ridiculous hysteria has got to stop. I mean, you've created such a mess out there among people for reasons completely unclear. There are people talking about the cure being worse than the disease. It's possible that some economies are lightening up too soon and people will die because of irrational fears of economic consequences that aren't going to exist. We're making bad decisions on the basis of bad analysis, and that's all driven by hysteria. When are we going to learn that the worst quote is not the best headline? Right? When are we going to become more educated readers and go, no, I'm not going to pick up a publication that does nothing but feed the scariest possible headlines to me. I want someone actually telling me what the median opinion is, and you don't ever get that. That's frustrating. Another thing that's coming out of this, I think we all have to remember, is the financial markets have been insanely volatile. And yet again, I mean, this is the 7th major sell-off in the stock market. And by the way, That's after the 20% decline in January of last year, by which April, May, we're at record high levels. By the end of the year, we had the third highest PE ratio in the history of the stock market. And now it's collapsed all over the place. At one point in time, we're going to wake up to the fact that the stock market is broken. It's broken. They broke it. You got to send a couple repairmen in, sweep out all the riffraff that broke it, and fix the damn thing and make it work again. Get rid of high-speed trading, get rid of dark pools, change the incentives, make financial organizations have fiduciary responsibilities to their clients. Come on, people, really? Come on, enough. Enough is enough is enough. And all these hedge fund managers screaming end of the world. Boy, they really set up a nice situation for themselves. When times are good, they make billions because they drive the U.S. economy. And when times are bad, they get billions of dollars in hands out because they drive the economy. No, they don't drive the economy. You drive it. I drive it. They finance it. They work for us, not the other way around. They're supposed to be the shock absorber for the economy, not the shock expander. Again, when are we going to pay attention to this nonsense?
Never
Last but not least, number three, I got one more complaint. Go. $3.5 trillion of federal borrowing this year. More as a percentage of GDP than during World War II, when we were fighting a global war against tyranny. We are borrowing more money now than then.
So,
I mean, there's so much pork and fat and nothing in this bill, and we are handing our children a fiscal disaster. Wake up, America.
So Chris, I mean, there were two things in my mind when you were saying that, and one is,
I'm sorry, I had to throw it in.
Aren't we paying? I mean, the deficit is going to be big. It is big.
It was already big. It was already $1 trillion, which was immoral in the context of a 11-year expansion with a healthy economy. To have $1 trillion deficit.
But isn't this the problem? Isn't actually this the problem?
Well, this is a problem, not yet. I mean, look, eventually it will catch up to us.
Yeah.
I mean, it was supposed to be 12 years from now. Now it's like 9 years from now or 8 years from now. If we have another year of this, who knows what we're going to end up being. I mean, listen, we elected president, a man who used to bill himself as the king of debt.
That's right.
Hey, man, you got an MO. Stick with it.
So look, I'm conscious of time. See this little fella here?
Yeah.
This is somebody called Sauce Bot. He's our mascot, company mascot, right?
Nice.
We're in the business of digital confidence. When I first met you, we talked about this, right? Hey, we are very fortunate in the technology industry that we are part of trying to drive, I hope, some of the messages from a purpose perspective that you've dropped, and that is some confidence through logic and right. What we do, people still want, thankfully, right? Thankfully, and I think that the concept of digital confidence becomes more and more important. Do you have any advice for companies?
Number one is keep thinking long term. It's not the end of the world. It's not even close to it. Keep your eye on the end game. Don't let this distract you from your core goals of training your people and expanding your workforce and making that new product and doing all the things you were doing prior to this pandemic. This comes, this goes, your company will still be there, and you don't lose track of that long ago. Number two, kind of goes back to the hysteria angle. And one of my frustrations of where we are as an economy, as a society, there are a lot of bad regulation getting pushed into place in different parts of the United States, and you're seeing that even in the cover of this virus, a lot of local push for things like permanent rent control and permanent labor laws that would prevent you from hiring or laying off people in whatever order you want. And the thing is this, is you walk into the room with these politicians and you say, even basic things, the Chamber of Commerce is there to advocate for business, may want to walk in and have a basic conversation about, well, we need to get permits moving a little faster, or I need to get licenses here, or I need a little help on this. And you're met with, how dare you walk in here with these trifling nonsense? Don't you understand the world's on fire? People are starving on their feet. It's the end of the world. And you're coming in here complaining about your permit time. How dare you? Well, look, the world's not on fire. In any objective sense, when you strip away the bullshit that we're constantly fed on a daily basis, never has the vast majority of Americans enjoyed a better life than they do now. That better life, our access to technology, our ability to do what we're doing here and have these great conversations while we're living in a pandemic, this is because of business. It's due to technology. You aren't bad guys. You aren't doing bad things. You're making the world a better place. You're making this pandemic easier to deal with. Stop apologizing.
Stop
apologizing.
What a rather nice way to bring this to a conclusion that we are, I hope, playing a part in doing that. We as a company are helping to test the WHO app to enable contact tracing, which will of course help, I hope, the V to be a true V. So
don't apologize.
Look, you need to get back.
Upset at Zoom. Why? Because their security procedures aren't locked down tight. Oh, please.
We'll cope.
We'll cope.
Dr. Chris Thornberg, your full and appropriate title. Thank you for joining Source Labs for this. I have to say, your timing of us doing this is wonderful. And I'm going to make sure this is the first one that gets out because it's the most relevant to right now. So thank you for taking some time out of your day. And it's a pleasure to see you. I look forward to maybe doing this over a beer when we can at the top of the V.
Sounds perfect. I will be there.
Well, thank you, Dr. Chris, for that such engaging time with us and for being so passionate about what you believe in and how you feel. We're very grateful indeed for you giving us your time. On the next episode, we change tack to the world of the arts. We're going to meet a gentleman by the name of Carlo Rizzi, a world-renowned conductor. He has opened seasons at the Metropolitan in New York, La Scala in Milano, and he is a wonderful Italian who moved to Wales to lead the Welsh National Opera. Of course, my home country. What's particularly special about him is while he was there, he learned to speak Welsh. Quite amazing. Not the easiest of languages. He covers a number of topics around leadership, his passion for music, and how he can cope with the pressures of bringing an orchestra, musicians, and performers together to create moments of pure perfection to delight audiences around the world. He's a wonderful individual, and I hope you'll join me listening to him about his views and how this world today has affected the arts so dramatically. Thanks for being with us.